The silver ship came down from the sky like a star falling to the ground, while the people of the royal world watched in silence. They had seen ships from other worlds before, but this one was different. It had the flag of Earth painted on its side. The light of 2 suns shone on the metal, making it glow bright and strange. The air felt heavy with wonder and fear. Ethan Cole was inside that ship. He was a young captain from Earth, chosen by his leaders to speak for all mankind. His heart beat fast as he looked through the window at the world below. Wide crystal plains stretched as far as he could see, with tall towers that touched the clouds. Rivers of light flowed across the land. It was like a dream, too perfect to be real. He told himself to stay calm. This was history in the making. When the ship landed, the sound of its engines rolled across the wide fields. Soldiers in silver armor stood in rows. They did not smile. They watched their hands close to the hilts of their blades. Ethan walked out slowly with a group of human envoys behind him. His boots touched the white path that led to a hall made of glass and stone. It was said that the rulers of this world had reigned for 1,000 years. Inside that hall stood their queen and her daughter, the princess. The walls shone with soft light, and music drifted like mist in the air. The smell of sweet oils and strange flowers filled the space. Everyone bowed except Ethan. He saluted as the humans did, pressing his hand over his heart. Some of the royal guards muttered at his boldness, but the queen raised her hand and silence fell. The princess watched him with wide eyes. Her name was Alara. People said she had never shown strong emotion in public, that her face was always calm and proud. But when her eyes met Ethan's, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, everything around her seemed to vanish. Ethan felt it too. He had met many leaders, some kind, some cruel, some proud. But the look in her eyes was not of pride or fear. It was shock, and something else he could not name. Unsettled him more than the sight of all those guards. Almost forgot the words he had practiced for the meeting. The queen asked him to speak. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but quiet. He talked about peace, about trade, about the wish of humans to be friends, not conquerors. He said that Earth did not wish to rule others but to learn from them and share what they could offer. He spoke with honesty, not using polished words or heavy titles. Some of the courtiers whispered among themselves. They said humans were wild and dangerous. They said they built machines that could destroy whole worlds. But a few listened closely to Ethan's words. Even the queen's eyes softened a little. When Ethan finished, there was silence again. The queen nodded slowly. The courtiers bowed. The princess still stood frozen in place, her thoughts spinning. She had always been taught that humans were rough and proud, but the man before her looked kind and strong, his eyes filled with something clear and firm. It confused her. After the meeting, Ethan and his team were taken to guest rooms in the royal palace. Everything there seemed designed to show power and beauty. The walls glowed like pearls, and the air smelled like rain. Ethan could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about the princess's look, felt that something important had begun, though he did not understand it yet. Far above the palace, lights from watchtowers crossed the sky. The people of this world remained uneasy. They had seen what humans could do in the short time they had crossed the stars. A new power had risen, and no one knew whether it would bring hope or ruin. In her chamber, Princess Alara sat by the window and stared at the distant lights of the Earth ship. She could still see Ethan's face in her mind. His eyes had been steady, not proud, but not afraid. No one had ever looked at her like that. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was only a visitor. A man from another world with bold manners and human charm. Yet deep in her heart, she felt something stirring, like a song she had forgotten long ago. Outside, the winds of night carried the scent of metal and rain. The stars shimmered in their cold silence. And on both sides, the visitors from Earth and the rulers of this shining world, hearts beat fast with the same thought. The meeting had changed everything. They just did not know how. That night, peace still held, but beneath its calm face, destiny had already begun to move. The next morning, the palace woke early. The air was cool and clear, and the light from the twin suns fell across the marble courtyards. The sound of bells echoed from faraway towers, calling the people to the great hall. It was the day of the second council, where the humans would speak again. The royal guards stood at attention, their armor shining like mirrors. Ethan walked through the long corridor toward the council chamber. His heart was steady, but his thoughts were heavy. He could feel the weight of what he had to represent. Behind him walked his small team of human diplomats. They whispered quietly, worried about how they would be received after the strange silence in yesterday's meeting. When they entered the chamber, the air was tense. The queen sat high upon her seat, and around her stood nobles, generals, and advisors. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Ethan took his place at the center of the floor and waited. The sound of his own breathing filled his ears. Then she came. The princess entered with quiet grace, her steps light but sure. She wore a simple gown of silver and white, and her hair shone in the sunlight that streamed from the high windows. When she sat beside the queen, she did not look at Ethan right away. She could still feel the warmth of his gaze from the day before, and it made her heart beat faster. The queen spoke first. Her voice was calm and certain. She asked Ethan about Earth, about its people, and its cities. Ethan answered each question with honesty. He described forests that stretched for miles, oceans with waves as high as mountains, and skies that turned gold at sunset. He told them about human inventions, about their joy in creating and exploring. He did not hide their flaws. He said that humans were not perfect, that they made mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but always tried to learn and do better. Some of the nobles did not like what they heard. One of them stood and spoke sharply. He asked why humans created weapons that could burn lands and destroy worlds. Ethan met his gaze and replied softly that humans built those because they feared the unknown, just as any people would when faced with danger. I said that Earth now wanted to leave behind such fear and build bonds instead of battles. The room remained quiet for a long moment. Then the queen nodded slowly. She said they would think about his words. The meeting ended, but whispers followed Ethan as he left the chamber. That night, the palace was full of restless talk. Some believed the humans might be allies, others feared they were only pretending, waiting for the right time to strike. The royal council gathered in secret rooms and argued until morning. Lara could not sleep. The more she thought about Ethan, the more questions filled her mind. What drove these humans so far from their home? What did he truly believe in? Yet she knew she could not ask these questions in public. Her mother would not allow it, so just before dawn she wrapped herself in a dark cloak and quietly left her room. She moved through the silent halls, her heart thumping fast. She passed the guards unseen and reached the small chambers where the humans stayed. The guards outside were asleep on their feet, tired after long shifts, and she slipped past them like a shadow. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal. Tools were spread across the table. Ethan was there, bent over a broken piece of his ship's communicator. His face was serious, his hands steady as he tried to fix the device. When he looked up and saw her, he froze for a second, then stood quickly. "Your Highness," he said softly, surprised. "You should not be here. I came because I needed to speak with you," Alara said, her voice low. "I need to understand what kind of people you truly are." Ethan set the tool down and smiled faintly, and asked me. "I will tell you the truth. They talked for a long time." She asked him about Earth's wars, about why humans fought each other. He told her that sometimes fear made people blind. He told her that pain taught humanity what peace meant. She asked him what he wanted most for his people, said, "A chance to belong among the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners." Alara listened quietly. For the first time, she saw humans not as a danger, but as a reflection of her own people's mistakes and hopes. When she finally stood to leave, dawn was creeping across the horizon. Ethan watched her go, and he felt a strange hope rising inside him. He knew that one conversation would not end centuries of fear and mistrust, yet something had changed tonight. He did not know what path lay ahead, but he was sure that it began with her. Outside, the palace stirred again with the coming day. The guards changed their posts, and the nobles gathered for new debates. But neither the queen nor her council knew that under the cover of night, two people from different worlds had begun something greater than any treaty, a fragile thread of trust. And as the suns rose high above the shining city, both Ethan and Alara felt the same quiet thought in their hearts. Perhaps the distance between worlds could be crossed. Not by ships or weapons, but by understanding. Days passed, and the air in the kingdom turned heavy. The humans stayed inside their quarters most of the time. The royal guards watched them wherever they went. The people in the streets whispered that war might be near. When the royal news towers announced that a fleet had been attacked at the border between Earth's territory and the royal worlds, fear filled every heart. Ethan woke one morning to the sound of alarms. The palace shook beneath him, rushed to the window, and saw smoke rising in the distance. A guard burst into the room and shouted that the council had blamed humans for the attack. Ethan felt his blood turn cold. He knew at once that something was wrong. The small team had no reason to fight. They'd come for peace, not war. He ran to the main hall, pushing past confused guards and servants. There he found the nobles shouting at one another. The queen stood firm on her throne, her expression unreadable. When she saw Ethan, she raised her hand for silence. The head of the defense council accused Earth of betrayal, saying they had proof of human ships near the destroyed fleet. Ethan tried to speak, but the hall erupted with shouting again. At last the queen ordered him to return to his quarters until a full review could be made. To him it sounded like a polite way of saying he was under arrest. In the upper tower, Princess Alara sat with her mother. She listened as the council gave their reports, but her heart told her something was not right. In the days she had spoken with Ethan, she had seen truth in his words. He did not speak like a man who would plan an attack. When she tried to speak for him, her voice trembled. The council dismissed her as foolish and young. They told her she was blinded by curiosity. That night Alara could not bear the silence. She went to the high balcony and looked at the faint glow of the destroyed fleet far above the sky. Her thoughts raced. If there was false proof, who had made it? She decided she needed to know the truth, no matter the cost. Ethan sat in his locked chamber, thinking of home. His people might already believe he had failed, could not let both worlds fall into hatred again. When the door opened with a quiet creak, he turned and saw Alara step in, wearing a plain cloak. She closed the door behind her. "You should not be here," Ethan said. "I came because I believe you," she said firmly. "I think someone wants this war. I think both our people are being used." Ethan looked at her with disbelief, then hope. He told her about strange signals he had picked up from their outer transmitters the night before the attack. They came not from human ships but from secret channels used by powerful lords. He had kept the recordings hidden. They could prove who was behind the attack. Alara's eyes widened. "If you have proof, we must show it to my mother." "She will never see me now," Ethan replied. "To her, I am already guilty." "Then we find another way," Alara said quietly. They formed a plan. Late that night, when the palace guards changed their watch, they would go to the data tower and break into the royal network. There they could compare the attack's records with Ethan's data. When the time came, they moved like shadows. They spoke little, only with looks and small nods. The air outside was cool, and the palace shone bright against the dark sky. They passed guards using hidden passages Alara had known since childhood. Finally, they reached the chamber of the tower. Ethan worked fast at the control station while Alara kept watch. He tapped codes into the glowing console, lines of data filling the screens. The truth came out slowly, like a secret long kept in darkness. The attack had not come from Earth ships at all. It was planned by a noble guild from within the Queen. Empire men and women who feared what an alliance with Earth would bring. They wanted both sides to strike first, so they could seize control after the war began. When Ethan showed Alara the files, she stared at them in silence. Her face turned pale. It was proof strong enough to change everything. "They will kill us if they find out we know this," she whispered. "Then we make sure everyone hears it before they can stop us," Ethan said. They copied the data onto small storage devices and ran back toward the lower levels. But before they could reach safety, a door ahead opened. A guard captain stepped out, sword in hand. He called for backup. Ethan grabbed Alara's arm and ran down another path. The sound of boots chased them through the halls. When they reached an old balcony, there was nowhere left to go. Below, the palace gardens were far beneath. "Jump with me," Ethan said quickly. She looked at him in shock. "There is water under the garden," he said. "It is our only chance." Without another word, they leaped into the darkness. The cold water broke their fall. They swam to the shadows of the city wall and climbed out, breathless and shaking. For the first time since they had met, Their lives truly depended on each other. As dawn rose over the shining towers, the palace bells rang again. The guards searched every corner, unaware that the truth now rested in the hands of a human man and a royal princess who would stop at nothing to save both their worlds. The sound of bells spread through the city as the morning sun touched the tall towers. The palace guards searched the streets, looking for the missing princess and the human captain. News spread fast. Some said the human had kidnapped her. Others said she had run away to help him. No one knew the truth. The queen sat in her chamber in silence, her heart torn between a mother's fear and a ruler's anger. Far from the palace, Ilara and Ethan moved through the narrow roads of the lower city. They wore simple cloaks to hide their faces. Around them, people shouted as news of the coming war reached the markets. Soldiers filled the sky with patrol ships. The streets that once glowed with peace now echoed with fear. Ethan could feel the small device with the stolen data in his pocket. It was their only hope. If they could show it to the people, if they could prove that someone else had planned the attack, the war might be stopped. But the enemy was powerful. The guild that had made the false proof had eyes and ears everywhere. As they walked, Ilara looked up at the great steps that led to the Tower of Voices. It was the place where all messages to the public were broadcast. If we reach that tower, we can show them the truth, she said. Ethan looked at the heavily guarded gates. We would need a miracle to get inside, he said with a faint smile. Sometimes courage begins with something that looks impossible. Ilara led him through old streets where she had played as a child. Hidden behind the outer walls was an old tunnel, used long ago by workers. The entrance was small and half-broken, but it led to the tower's lower levels. They entered quietly, their footsteps soft on the damp ground. Inside the tunnel, the air was cold and smelled of dust. The dim light from above barely showed their path, but Ethan's small torch gave them enough to see. He could see the calm determination in her face. She no longer looked like a royal princess. She looked like someone ready to fight for everyone. When they reached the tower's heart, they heard voices above. Guards. Ethan signaled for silence and listened. The guards were talking about how the queen had ordered the human ship to leave the planet at once. If the crew resisted, they would be destroyed. Ethan's heart sank. If the humans were forced to leave, no one would be left to speak for Earth. They had to act fast. Ilara found a narrow ladder that led to the control room. They climbed carefully, moving slow so the ladder would not rattle. When they reached the top, they saw the main broadcast system glowing with soft blue light. Only 2 guards stood near it. Ethan waited for the right moment, then threw a small round tool across the room. It clattered loudly on the floor, drawing the guards' attention. As they turned, he rushed forward and struck one in the chest, knocking him down. Lara hit the other's arm with a heavy rod. Both guards fell before they could sound the alarm. Ethan quickly connected his device to the control panel. Streams of data flickered on the screen. He worked fast, sending the files containing the true evidence to every receiver across the capital. A moment later, voices rose from the streets below. The screens that hung over the city began to show the hidden recordings, secret orders from the guild, messages planning the false attack, names of nobles behind the plot. People stopped in their tracks and stared. The truth was out. Ethan looked at Ilara. She was standing still, watching her world shake. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Ethan said, smiling a little. "We did." Below them, chaos erupted in the palace. The queen's advisors ran to hide their papers. The soldiers who had doubted the war began to turn their weapons against the traitors. The people shouted in the streets, not in anger at humans now, but in rage at the liars within their own ranks. The queen watched the images with tears in her eyes. She had trusted her council, only to learn that they had led her into hate and fear. Out. Her orders changed at once. The search for her daughter stopped, and she called her armies to protect the civilians instead of preparing for battle. Ethan and Ilara left the tower through the same tunnel. They knew that many would still try to silence them, but the truth had already spread beyond control. The light of dawn touched the rooftops as they ran through the quiet alleys. Ethan stopped for a moment and looked back at the city. Smoke still rose, but it was not the smoke of war. It was the smoke of change. Lara touched his arm. "We cannot stop now," she said. We have started something that must end with peace." He nodded. "Then we will see it through." In the distance, the sound of the crowd grew louder. Flags of both sides began to appear in the streets, not in battle, but side by side. People were beginning to understand. High above, birds circled in the dawn light. The day that could have become the first of war was turning into the first of truth. Standing together, a human and a princess looked out over their world and knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The city looked different after that day. The bright towers were still standing, but the sound of fear was gone from the streets. For the first time in many years, people from all sides walked and spoke with one another without anger. News of the truth had spread to every world and every home. The guild that had caused the war had been caught, and their power was broken. Ethan and Alara stood on the high balcony of the palace, side by side. The air smelled of rain, and light from the setting suns painted the sky red and gold. Below them, the people celebrated the end of the fighting. Ships from Earth and the Queen's fleets were landing together, bringing aid instead of weapons. It was a sight no one had ever thought possible. Ethan looked at the crowd and felt a deep peace he had never known. So much had been lost in the struggle, but this moment made all the risk worth it. Lara turned her eyes toward him and smiled, a quiet and honest smile that needed no words. Her mother, the Queen, had called them both to the great hall that morning. She had looked tired but free of the cold pride she once carried. She had listened as her people spoke and as the humans explained how they had worked together to uncover the plot. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. She said that trust could not be commanded, but it could be earned through truth and courage. She thanked Ethan for saving not just her daughter, but their whole kingdom. In the days that followed, the two worlds began to rebuild. Old walls of fear and jealousy were slowly torn down. People who once looked at humans with suspicion now offered them food, shelter, and friendship. Human engineers helped the royal workers repair the energy lines across the capital. In return, the royal healers taught Earth medics advanced ways to treat illness and injury. It felt as if two halves of the same heart had finally found each other. Ethan stayed in the capital while the new treaties were written. Each day seemed brighter than the one before, yet he knew he would have to return to Earth soon. His leaders would need his report, and peace had to be made official. He often walked the palace gardens in the evenings, thinking of what would come next. Sometimes Alara joined him without a word, and they would walk among the silver trees, listening to the wind in silence. One evening, as the sky turned soft blue, Alara said, "When you go home, will you come back?" Ethan stopped, looked at her, unsure what to say. "If I can," he said at last. "My place is with my people." She nodded slowly. "And mine is here. But maybe one day our people will not be separate. Maybe one day there will be no need for two sides at all," he smiled. "That day will come, Alara, and when it does, I will be here to see it with you." The next morning, ships from Earth arrived to carry the humans home. The Queen herself came to the landing field to see them off. She thanked Ethan again, and when she placed her hand over his, the crowd cheered. He bowed deeply to her and turned toward Alara. For a moment, the noise of the people faded, and it was only the two of them. "Take care of them," he said softly. "I will," she answered. "And you take care of yours." As he boarded the ship, their eyes met one more time, just as they had on the first day they saw each other. It was the same feeling, the same spark that had stopped her speech when they first met, but now it was filled with peace instead of wonder. When the ship lifted into the sky, Alara watched it rise until it became a small point of light and vanished among the stars. The wind caught her hair, and she whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." Months passed. The treaty between Earth and the royal worlds was signed. Trade and travel began. Stories of the human captain and the princess spread among the people, turning into song and legend. Some said they would meet again. Others said their bond was only a symbol of something far greater, the friendship between two worlds that had been enemies. Ethan returned to Earth and was greeted as a hero. But when people asked how he had won peace, he always said, "It was not me alone. It was a woman who taught me that bravery is not only in battle but also in trust." Years later, when new ships traveled freely between the stars, a new palace was built on neutral ground, where humans and the royal kind worked side by side. At its center stood two statues, one of a man holding a symbol of truth, and one of a woman holding a torch of light. The plaque below read, "For the day when two hearts saw each other and the war ended before it began." And at night, when the stars shone over that place, travelers would look up and say quietly that the world had changed because two people dared to believe that peace was possible. Across the skies, the promise they made still lived on, the promise that the truth once known would always lead the way.